Randall, should we be worried about Christian nationalism?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Christian nationalism is one of the most I mean, geez. I mean, again, I hate to use the word Christian because there's nothing Christian about it. It's a dangerous idea. It's a very dangerous idea, and I think it can be refuted on all sorts of grounds. But let me try three. First of all, biblical and theological. Jesus. I mean, this is a pretty important person in our faith tradition. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." End of conversation, right? That should deal the death blow to this Christian nationalism nonsense. Historically, it's just, I mean, it's, this stuff that the founders were evangelical Christians. I mean, give me a break. I mean, that's ludicrous. I like to say that with the very, very possible exception of Benjamin Rush, who was a physician, and John Witherspoon, who was the president of the College in New Jersey, now Princeton. With the very possible exception of those two, none of the founders would be welcome as members in any of the congregations now arguing for Christian nationalism. I mean, Thomas Jefferson? Would Thomas Jefferson be a member of Thomas Road Baptist Church, or, you name whatever? I mean,
yeah. By the way, that's no small statement you made, that none of the founding fathers would be accept. Yeah.
No, I mean, not even, no, it wouldn't even be close.
That's right.
No.
I mean, even Barry Goldwater, and I want to believe Ronald Reagan wouldn't even like what's going on.
No, that's right. Absolutely. No.
Or William Buckley, they would, right?
True. That's true. That's true. Historically, again,
have we ever come this close? Like when you look at, maybe aside from the theonomy of the Massachusetts Bay colony, and then once we colonized, the 13 colonies become states. When you think of the first, second, third, fourth Great Awakenings, have we ever gotten this close to this kind of religious theonomy?
Not quite this close, but there have been attempts. And it tends to occur in times of perceived crisis. Now, any era can be defined as a crisis, of course, but during the War of 1812, for example, Timothy Dwight argued that America's troubles were due to the fact that we hadn't acknowledged Jesus or hadn't acknowledged God in the charter documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. During the Civil War, there was an organization called the National Reform Association, NRA, actually, National Reform Association, which is still around, that drafted a constitutional amendment that would declare the United States to be a Christian nation. They took it all the way to Abraham Lincoln, who wisely temporized and said, well, let me think about it, get back to you, and never did. Again, wisely. After the school prayer decisions in the 1960s, there was another surge of interest in amending the Constitution to declare that the United States is a Christian nation. So we've had these close calls before. What's different now is that we have a Supreme Court that does not respect the First Amendment. Given the recent decisions, I told somebody that I wish we had a Supreme Court that gave half as much deference to the First Amendment as it does to the Second Amendment. It's that really worries me. The Supreme Court worries me a lot because they just have no respect for the First Amendment. Going back historically, and then I'll come back to the third point. The Treaty of Tripoli was negotiated under George Washington's administration, sent to the Senate for ratification by John Adams, and ratified unanimously by the United States Senate on June 7th, 1797. Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli reads, and I don't have it in front of me, but this is a very close paraphrase. The United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. The United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion.
Right. And if I remember, and you can give more context, the Treaty of Tripoli, in our foreign, obviously in our foreign policy then, we're dealing with what is a Muslim state,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the Muslim state is worried that this new nation, America,
right,
might potentially Christianize. Was it about shipping lanes or
it was the
trade?
The Barbary Coast pirates were disrupting the shipping.
Right. So they're worried that since we're a theonomy and going to Christianize this Muslim state. Is that the context?
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
So then the treaty they put that in writing.
Yeah. The United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. And one goes on to say that we have no enmity toward Muslims, essentially. That's
right.
What it says. So, this Christian nationalism, it's baseless. And the guy who's doing all this damage is this David Barton, who claims to be a historian. He's not.
Yeah, how are you doing with him as a historian?
I think the fact that Thomas Nelson Publishers in your home city of Nashville withdrew his Jefferson lies from publication tells you something about David Barton as a historian. So Christian nationalism can be refuted theologically or biblically, historically, but third, tactically. The First Amendment is the best friend that religion has ever had. I think the First Amendment is America's best idea.
Yeah, I've heard you say that. Yeah,
and
yes,
it is because it set up a free marketplace for religion and mandated that the government stayed out of the religion business. And this has created a vibrant marketplace for religion, which means that we are the most religious country on the planet by most indices. It's precisely because of the First Amendment, and trying to collapse this distinction between church and state is the wrong. It's tactically the wrong. And the people who are arguing for this are arguing against their own best interests.
Yes.
And let me go back historically and try to put more context on this. The person responsible for this metaphor of separation between church and state is Roger Williams, who's the founder of the Baptist tradition in America. And Roger Williams wrote that he wanted to separate the garden of the church from the wilderness of the world by means of a wall of separation. Now, what we miss in that metaphor, because we are modern, Henry David Thoreau people, is that Roger Williams and his contemporaries did not share our romance about wilderness. They were not members of the Sierra Club, which is to say, when he talks about protecting the garden of the church from the wilderness of the world, his concern is the integrity of the faith, lest it be compromised by too close an association of the state. Now, I'll give you a further example of this, if you don't mind my going on here.
No, please.
I'm sure you remember, and other people remember, in 2001, Roy Moore, at that time the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, plopped a granite monument in the lobby of the Judicial Building in Montgomery, emblazoned with the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
At the same time, he refused any other religious representation in that place. Hindu, even the Alabama Atheist Association, both members probably, had a petition to allow their views to be in that space. He said, no, nothing but the Ten Commandments, which is a precursor now of what's happening in Louisiana.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Which is it's just nonsense. And I was one of the expert witnesses in that case. And when Judge Thompson ruled correctly that the monument in that public space represented a violation of of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment and ordered the monument removed. One of the protesters screamed, "Get your hands off my God." I think you and I agree. One of those commandments says something about a graven image.
Yeah, right.
And that was precisely Roger Williams' point. Protect the garden of the the garden of the church from the wilderness of the world by means of a wall of separation.
That's right.
We're in a bad state right now, as a country, as a society, in part because in 1979 we lost our most reliable watchman on that wall of separation, and that was the Southern Baptist Convention, that up until 1979 were real Baptists, meaning that they believed in liberty of conscience and the separation of church and state. And after the conservative takeover in 79, they abandoned that, and now they're arguing for a collapse of those two entities, and we are in trouble.
Yeah, and I know I agree. I especially as a religious historian, that the conservative takeover by Paige Patterson, Al Mohler of the SBC and others, right? And if I could tie it to a theology, which was both those guys are Calvinists,
which is unlikely, but yes,
right. Nobody could have ever assumed the SBC would go Calvinistic, but. We'll come back to history, but dabbling in some theology and the historic ideas of theology. And this is my contrarian idea or question, do some of even Christian theology in its first two millenniums need to be saved, or does some Christian theology that served its time, I'm not taking a shot at it, needs to evolve into the third millennium? Because, Randall, what happens if you believe that the Bible is inerrant? What happens if you believe that the authority of God is my interpretation of the Bible? Don't you get Baptist takeovers? Don't you get sewing the Bible in the flag? Don't you get Christian theonomies? Don't you get 10 Commandments in all Louisiana classrooms? And with much boldness, the Attorney General of Louisiana saying, "Come sue me. Come on. Come sue me." So, and that's what I'm seeing, that some of these staid Christian theologies, regardless of somebody maybe not abusing them, the sons and daughters of those faiths just intellectually cannot wrap their mind around that anymore, because they have Muslim friends, they have gay friends, they have Jewish friends, and they go, well, I don't want to not be Christian anymore, but my Christian God can't send all of my non-Christian people I love to Christian hell.
And I would argue the reason for that is the theology of the incarnation. I think that the beauty of what you just said is it points to the centrality, the importance of the incarnation. It's much harder for me to condemn Muslims or gays or trans people or whatever it is if I'm sitting across the dinner table from a real person.
Back to Christian nationalism. Could they win?
Oh, I think they're winning. And the decisive entity, I think, here is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has no respect whatsoever for the First Amendment. And, if, for example, the Alabama 10 Commandments case, which we talked about earlier, came up before the Supreme Court today, I think it's very likely that they would say, hey, go for it. We don't worry about the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. any longer. To
the Supreme Court, Randall, do we, like when we say we have a Supreme Court that, is some of this revealing their religious views? Certainly it seems like Thomas is an evangelical, certainly seems like Alito or certain Alito's wife
they're
is
Catholic.
Conservative Catholic.
Oh, yeah.
Like Amy, like our Coney Barrett, she is.
Right.
Do we know where Gorsuch and religiously is?
I think Gorsuch actually is Episcopalian. No, I'm
How about John Roberts? Do we know where he is?
I think I'd have to look, but the majority on the Supreme Court is Catholic.
Yeah.
Now that may include Sotomayor. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the tally again. But I think what happened was during the presidencies where these appointments were made, each of these presidents really owed their election to the religious right. Certainly Reagan did, and he appointed several. George W. Bush and now Trump. They owed their election to the religious right. Well, how do you pay them back? Of course, the big plum is a Supreme Court appointment. So the logical thing would be to say, well, I'm going to appoint an evangelical jurist. Name one. and I mean they're coming up through the ranks now, and I'm not sure I'd call them evangelical, at least in my definition of the term, but they claim to be. And I think during those presidencies, Reagan, George W. Bush, and Trump, what they did essentially was to farm out or appoint proxies, which were conservative Catholics, because there were really no qualified jurists to appoint to the Supreme Court. So that's why you have an overwhelmingly conservative Catholic presence on the Supreme Court. I believe that Thomas himself is Catholic as well, but don't hold me to that.
Yeah, and aside from theology, we know socially a conservative Protestant and a conservative Catholic many times share the same social worldview.